Suresh, this we started by discussing data, sources of data, and then we had this national sample survey that we saw. That is very infrequent, right? Once in 10 years, once in 5 years.
Yeah.
Some of it is once in 5 years, otherwise it's decadal, right?
Yeah. So one of the problems with this large-scale surveys by the official sources is that data availability is not in very regular intervals.
Whereas we saw also, you explained that consumer behavior changes.
Yes.
It changes quite fast.
Yeah.
Over time, and reasonably fast it changes.
Yes.
Preferences change very fast.
Yes.
So if you do once in 10 years, you may miss the bus, right? You may miss the understanding of consumer behavior altogether.
Yes. And that is the problem with such official sources. So a lot of concepts that we discussed in terms of, looking at elasticities, looking at, what goods have become inferior over time. etc. To analyze those things would be difficult with this kind of infrequent data.
So I was just saying this Center for Monitoring Indian Economy is coming in the press.
Right.
The news quite a lot because,
right,
especially because of the unemployment reports, which are very, we are seeing it quite often.
Yeah.
So I just went to their website,
right,
and saw this thing called the consumer pyramid that they have created.
Yeah.
So here is, I have opened this website here.
Yeah.
Consumer pyramid.
Yeah.
IDX.CMI. Just, I think in Google you just type consumer pyramid or CMIE and CPHS, right? Consumer pyramid household survey.
Right.
And you get this, right? You get this site.
Yeah.
So, I mean, looks much more interesting in terms of the things they're doing. Can you comment on what we're doing?
Yes,
what is it?
it's going to be a very, very important source of data. For, I would say, 4 reasons. One, coverage is pretty good. 234,000 households.
It's a lot.
Which is quite a good number as far as the coverage is concerned. Second, it is a continuous survey. And when I say continuous survey, you get over time how households are actually consuming and what is happening to their well-being over time, because we are correlating consumption and well-being. Third, it is longitudinal data.
Okay,
and
you'll explain that.
What we mean by longitudinal data is the same household is getting surveyed again and again. So generally, we have two kinds of data to observe all these phenomena that we talk about. One is time series data. That is over time, the variable what is happening. Second is cross-section data. You take a snapshot of a particular point in time. That is 2021, what is happening, and that is that survey. So NSS surveys are basically cross-sectional data.
Okay.
GDP data of India is time series data, and that is time series data. Now, there is a third kind of a data that is pooled time series and cross-sectional called panel data.
Okay.
So, you are pooling observations over time. Longitudinal data is where you are pooling observations, but the same households or firms
you can track one household
over time.
Yeah. Whereas in the other thing, even in panel data, you can't say this come from this household, that may come from some other household.
Yes. So it is unbalanced panel.
It could be unbalanced. Okay. So here this is longitude. So that is an extremely important thing, isn't it? Because you can track one house and see over a period of 10 years. And if you're doing it often enough, what has happened to this house?
Yeah.
So maybe one child got educated and something happened and something. And like that you can collect houses.
So you have a very important database to look at what we call as the mobility of households. Yeah. And mobility of households are in terms of economic mobility that we are talking about. And in terms of their consumption, we can infer. In terms of their incomes, we can infer, because incomes and consumption are correlated. Further, we can see mobility in terms of how their consumption basket is getting diversified. We can also see mobility in terms of what are the commodities that have become inferior goods to them over a period of time. So that, I think, is a very important aspect of this. And finally, the advantage of this data is also it is a fast frequency data, which means that surveys are conducted comprehensively 3 times a year now. So you get 3 times a year of the information of the same household. And if you build it over a period of time, well, I think that's a rich source of data. Now, what they do is basically in terms of what they call as waves. Like, in NSS, we talked about rounds. Here it is waves. Yeah. Because it is so frequent, waves come and go kind of a thing. Now, what is happening is the 23rd wave that was happening.
Okay.
And we find that some of the results of that are coming. So every wave, the data is available, and the unit level data of this is a paid, it's a private agency, so it's a paid data.
Yeah.
But the summary as well as the highlights of this data are published and discussed widely.
Okay. What would be an example of that?
Now, I will just take one example of this. So before we go to that, basically this data has four important heads.
Okay.
One is the people of India, that is basically in terms of peculiarities and attributes of people of India, in terms of their consumption behavior. That is one set of data. Second set of data is what they call as the aspirational India, where the perceptions and sentiments of people in terms of their decisions regarding the purchase of assets and things of that sort are captured.
Will it ever be predict?
No, it's a survey, no? So they will ask in terms of their perception. Yeah. Would you be buying?
Will you be buying in the next 10 years?
In 10 years or 5 years or whatever it is. Or do you think such a purchase would you like to have such a purchase kind of thing? So that's an aspirational thing that is
right.
Third is basically income pyramids. Yeah, that is basically in terms of seasonality of incomes and how incomes are actually vulnerable to certain shocks in the economy and its implications, and implications in terms of the consumption basket of these households. And finally, we have the consumption pyramids, where we have the fast frequency consumption expenditure of households. Fast frequency means there are three rounds, and that is so. Let us take one data, and then we will see from wave 22. Just some highlights I would like to. Yeah. So this is the wave 22 that I was talking about. Now, one of the important thing that is going to happen with this database is that they're also expanding the sample size. It has not reached a stable or a maturity in terms of the sample size. They would like to increase it more. Now, here in wave 22, we had 176,000 households. And there is also a very high response rate. That is 73.44% of the households surveyed responded to all their questions.
I see.
Now,
that's high.
That's quite high, because especially a survey that is being conducted during this pandemic time, the response rate is quite high. Now, we also have a very interesting kind of results that will come. Of course, the survey is conducted during pandemic, so we know that incomes are depressed.
Correct.
So we say that the average monthly income of households in January 2021 is lower than the nominal income in terms of January 2019.
Oh, I see. Not even 20.
Not even 2019. So that's a very, very important kind of an inference. We have actually
gone back.
Yeah, in terms of this. So in 2021, the average monthly income of Indian household was still lower than the nominal income in equivalent in terms of what was available in January 2019. Now, demand is weak because income is weak.
Yeah.
But very interestingly, this survey also throws up that where you work actually matters. That is, looking at the people employed in companies or other kinds of jobs which were vulnerable during lockdown, they find that non-office setting, so office people and non-office, that's how they classify. Non-office setting people suffered quite a bit in terms of their incomes. And we find that agricultural employment increased, yeah, because there was large scale movement of people from the urban areas to rural areas.
Right.
So agriculture
It was
employment
very-
increased.
yeah.
So this agriculture employment, an inference which we can draw is that this increase in agriculture employment is due to the fact that a lot of people working in the cities were in non-office jobs, which were vulnerable. So they had to come back. Now, this has got important implications in terms of their incomes, in terms of their consumption, what kind of consumption baskets that we have, and important implications in terms of elasticities of demand, all these concepts that we talked about.
These shifts may be temporary, they may be permanent. Some of them may actually be.
Yeah, so there are two possibilities there. Some of them might actually go back to the same place and then work. Some might not even go back. Why? Because that job might not be there. So I was working for example, I was working in a petty shop somewhere in the urban location. The shop owner itself was
Bankrupt.
Yeah. So he would have actually wound up the shop. So when I go back to city, there is one possibility: I can actually explore a new job.
Yeah.
Which might be equally vulnerable or whatever the situation at that point in time. But there is this fraction which might not even go back. And that is a worry when we have this kind of, large scale shocks onto the economy.
So you may have a permanent shift in the consumption.
In the consumption basket. Now, again, this insights then can also be, there is a very detailed kind of a database that is available, which we can access, and we have to pay for it. Using that, we can draw different patterns. Yeah. Now, one small thing that I want to highlight here is that, researchers use this data quite a bit now.
I see.
Yeah. And see, these are researchers from Monash University and University of Melbourne. They use the data and see how uneven is this expansion of electricity supply.
I see. Supply.
Yeah.
Of electricity. I see.
Now, very, very interestingly, this work shows that, in a growing economy, it is expected that electricity expansion and household consumption of electricity also
will keep increasing. Yeah.
Yesterday, in the last session when we discussed, we saw in the consumption basket how, for power and energy, how people are allocating budget. And it is also expected that over time, this energy consumption reaches a stable kind of a thing, because
beyond a point,
air conditioning and all these things. But we find that, there is a lot of unevenness in terms of electricity supply, and they have three hypotheses which they locate, what they call as clientism. Yeah. So there is some kind of a political interference in terms of distributing these connections. Two, there is also incrementalism, that is high quality energy infrastructure wherever it is available. They have the largest increase, which is natural. So the farthest point
increasing, those that are good are increasing
better. So there is a kind of a concentration.
The wealthy are getting wealthier, and
kind of a phenomenon.
Something like that.
Yeah. And then locations with poorest previous electricity supply experience largest increase. That is very important because it's a base effect, no?
Yeah, because it's starting at a lower base.
Lower base kind of.
Even if a small change is there, it will show as a percentage. It will show.
Yeah. So what I wanted to highlight here was that there is a very interesting kind of a use of one of the data sets to find out a very interesting policy question in terms of expansion of electricity. Yeah. So this we highlighted it only to show how this data can be used for various kind of analysis.
Understand.
Now, one can also have different kinds of research ideas from this. For example, there is employment data which gives a lot of information.
It's very rich.
Yeah, information on employment. And then there are a lot of research ideas that can be generated. Yeah. For example, during this COVID lockdown, what is happening to occupational structure? The question that we discussed just now. Will the migrants come back? Or what kind of jobs do they get? Now, what happened? What explains this kind of agriculture employment rise? Can agriculture absorb all these people? Which has got important implications on incomes, which has got important implications on consumption basket.
Right.
One set of questions. Second set of questions, again, when we come to consumption basket, well, during the pandemic, we all know that government came up with a number of incentives to spend money because people started to hold whatever they have with this kind of a fear that if I lose my job, I need some money. So, government incentivized this spending. But given this set of incentives that are provided by the government, has it actually led to increased demand? What has happened to consumption basket over time in that? Yeah. And non-durable consumption, durable consumption, what is happening? Food consumption, because there was also a fear that a lot of people might go without food. So a number of issues can be explored using this data.
Very nice. There's another thing that I came across. These consulting companies, McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and so on, they keep doing some interesting things with consumer trends.
Yeah.
So I saw a interesting report by BCG.
Yeah.
This
Of
course 2019, somewhat old.
Yeah.
But this one says it says top 10 trends that are altering consumer behavior in India.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to hear your views on. There are few. I just can, without reading that, you just go to what they found. This one, right?
Yeah.
So these are the 10. They say 10 emerging behavioral trends of Indian consumers.
Yeah.
And so these are interesting ones. Like, I found some of them. For example, they find that the rise of the female decision maker.
Yeah.
They think that the women are making a decision on what to buy.
Yeah.
It used to be men earlier.
Yes.
And it's becoming increasingly women now.
Yes.
This is an interesting trend.
Yes.
it makes a difference in terms of how companies would target in terms of advertising and so on.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
That people are actually becoming time conscious. Like we discussed this, I believe, batter. That is what BCG found.
Yeah.
Basically, that's another.
Yeah.
Then because of time consciousness, they are adopting habits like pre-packaged food, cereal, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And they want to basically be up to date in terms of trendy.
What are the latest trends?
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And there's this business of health, right? Suddenly it has become important.
Very important now, especially with the pandemic.
Health focus. Health focus. So you want to eat only healthy food,
then.
vegan food, something like that.
Yeah.
So this kind of surveys. Would you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. So
how important are these things?
These kind of surveys are also very important because at one level, these are inputs for strategic decision making for the firms. For the firms in terms of where they should position themselves in the market. That is, 5 years from now, should I position myself in terms of a healthy food segment, if I'm a firm which is operating in the food space? Or should I position in the market where I always make ready to eat stuff or whatever it is? Those decision making is actually aided by this kind of surveys. It's a kind of a market intelligence come market forecasting kind of a thing. It gives us broad trends as to where we are headed, which becomes very useful for the supply side of the market because using this demand information, you can actually calibrate your supply side and then position yourself in the market. Now, the second thing is that for a lot of firms, it is expensive and it is difficult to conduct individual surveys. So they rely on the information of these large-scale surveys, which are put out. You can purchase this. Some are put out in public domain and things of that sort. And third important aspect is that a lot of these surveys also cover geographically most parts of India to give a representative kind of a picture of the country, of the economy. So if a small firm or even a mid-sized firm, if they are doing survey, their reach will be very less. So these surveys are very important in terms of such
Yeah.
aspects.
And they have done, I mean, actually slightly more detail is there. I mean, of course, this fact is interesting also is that these trends are true regardless of age. So you can see this, whether it's for all age groups, for all income groups, whether it is city or rural,
Yeah.
gender,
Yeah.
some of these trends seem to hold, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, another figure which I want to show you is this figure, where they've done it for category wise.
Yes.
How important it is for vehicles,
Okay.
two-wheelers,
Yeah.
four-wheelers,
Yeah.
for appliances,
Yeah.
for gadgets,
Yeah.
for outings.
Yeah.
So sector specific. So this is very sector.
Yeah.
So you can say for vehicles, for two-wheelers,
Yeah.
information centric shopping is that important.
Yeah.
Trendy shopping is that important.
Yeah.
Time saving services,
Yeah.
health and wellness. So like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
you can grade the
Yes.
importance of these factors
Yeah.
by the sector.
Yeah.
So they've done sector specific stuff.
And that's very important because that gives us or gives a supplier very precise information in terms of what is going to happen in the sector in the next 5 years or in the next medium term at least. Now, one interesting case that I want to bring to your attention, GV, in this context is, a lot of suppliers might not know that there is fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. That is, even at the lower
Lowest income strata,
there could be a big market. And we know the famous case of Hindustan Lever, which actually pitched for that particular segment, and they made a fortune out of that at that particular point in time. Another interesting case of
because even those people have aspirations.
those people have
We discussed the
aspirations.
cinema
Yes.
thing business. They want
Yes.
to go for the first day.
Yes,
Spending on clothes, we saw rural areas they spend more.
very, very interesting.
Festival spending and all that.
Yeah,
They will borrow and spend on festivals.
yes.
Right?
So, where you want to position in the market then is very important, and that decision can be arrived using the analysis of such large scale surveys.
Right.
So that's a very, very interesting and growing aspect of data analytics now. And the second part which I would like to add to that is basically visualization of this data is also very important now.
Even this presenting
It
it
is
is
presenting this
Yeah.
this form,
Yeah.
unlike earlier days when we only had
Or
tables,
tables.
which was quite dry and
Yeah.
everything. So I think analytics then will have to look at how we can capture this and then present it in a very appealing manner to the